said it so on this forum for every single police officer on the street will be 10 snitches.
Yeah, of course. People will talk.
Very worrying.
We need to make a counter.
On a community point of view, it's very worrying. Because we have very good relationships with the police and everything. And
yeah, but the police are going to lose all. The police are going to lose their relationship. Anyway,
I think tell you all now live.
Time will shoot up.
yeah, what you say
Huh?
on YouTube.
Now everything you say is on YouTube.
The police really don't.
I get about 700 million hits every day. So
If you change the title for that Yomi to Trump or whatever, you'll get million. You heard especially if you say £1 million.
that's right. No, I don't get more than that. Don't say I get that. I don't get more than a million. I always get more than that. Okay, right. I want to get. Let's see if we can get into this very, very quickly. We're learning a sugi about tumah. The halacha is that korban sibur. The halacha is that korban sibur is doichet tumah. If the majority of Kali Solotami, we keep going, right? If majority of Kali Solotami, we keep going. Our Mishnah told us the variety of korbanos that are brought with tumah. The Mishnah actually says there are 5 of them. Worked out yesterday. We know it from where Hadoi.
Moshe, I was so excited for a minute. I was the host. Rabbi, you're on mute. Rabbi, you're on mute. You're on mute, Rabbi. Rabbi, you're on mute.
Thank you for telling me, Moshe Levi. Thank you very much.
Okay.
Can you hear me now? Levi, can you hear me?
Yeah, I can hear you, yeah.
Yeah, I can hear you.
Second wide line for the 3rd time. Ein Zayin on the base. Hashem my sister the Rabbi Yisroel. The Kivadam Abinum Tati says you need both boss and dam. But it's Achilles and Maratz and Sislam Maratz and Achilles. Hichios betuma can become betuma. Answers the Gemara. I feel it in Rabbi Yisroel Kasova Rabbi Yisroel Tis Maratz ala Oilim. That the tzitz is not just maratza on blood, which is tummy, it's also maratza on that which goes on the mizbeach, which is tummy. Says the Gemara, that works for zvachim. That means you've got korban. There are 3 parts: part which you eat, part which goes on the mizbeach to be burnt, and the blood. Says Rabbi Yisroel, if you don't have flesh, you don't have blood. If you don't have blood, you don't have flesh. Says the Gemara, couldn't show what's the point of carrying on. If it all becomes tummy, everything else is not going to continue. Answers the Gemara that tzitz is meratza also for the bit that which is burnt on the mizbeach. So therefore, since the tzitz is meratza that which is burnt on the mizbeach, so therefore you continue with the zvika because of that which burnt on the mizbeach. For the Gemara, but by menachas, nothing gets burnt on the mizbeach except for the kometz. And if you hold that the tzitz is only meratza on the kometz, so then what's the point of doing the kometz? There's nothing which is going to work. Says, well, Omi, Kyoma, Yisroel, Nami, do we not tell to Bezvachim? But Menachas Loyama, Rabbi Yisroel made his rule. I mean, Dam and Bosa and Dam is referring to Korbanos, but Menachas, he never said that. Menachas Loyama, did he not say that? Menachas, what's Nan? Nitbu Shiur, if the leftover of the mincha got tummy, or of the Shiur got lost, Kemidas Rabbi Lezer, according to Rabbi Lezer, that one without the other works, Kshela. Kemidas Rabbi Yeshua, that you need both, Pesula. So you see that Rabbi Yeshua holds even by mincha, you need to have both, otherwise no point continuing. I just want to know. Kemidas Rabbi Yeshua, Kemidas Veloy Kemidas, in his plan, in his track, but not exactly like him. Kemidas Rabbi Yeshua had a bayin on tarti. Like Rabbi Yeshua, they need both. But Veloy Kemidas Rabbi Yeshua, did Rabbi Yeshua b'zvochim omar b'menochas loyoma. Rabbi Yeshua only said that by zvochim, not by menochas. Velo high tana, this tana that says that if you don't have the leftover of the mincha, it doesn't work. So I feel by menochas. He holds even by mincha. But Rabbi Yeshua himself never said by mincha. Says the Gemara. Two questions. Umanu high tana de koik vose machlit femine. Who is the Tana who holds of Rabbi Yeshua that he needs both? And he's even more machmir than Rabbi Yeshua, because Rabbi Yeshua says you only say by Zvochim, and this Tana says we say the same principle that mean Dam and Bosim and Dam also by Menachas. Boy Tanya, we're going to have a Beis now which does not make any sense, and the Gemara later is going to tackle it. But one thing we see from this Beis is that Rabbi Yeshua was also discussing Menachas. What's the Beis to say? Omar Yosef. I see that Rabbi Lezer is right by minchas and by zvachim. And I see that Rabbi Yeshua is right by zvachim and minchas, which is a contradiction. You can't say that both out. Rabbi Lezer is zvachim shoyim damafishen boso. So that you can use the blood even if there's no boso. But Rabbi Yeshua, that one without the other does work. I hold Rabbi Yeshua, the one without the other does not work. Later the Gemara is going to discuss what Rabbi in the world means. Doesn't make any sense. How can he say we pass like both in both different cases? But one thing we do see is that Rabbi Yeshua holds this principle that if you don't have one, you can't do the other, both by Zvachim and by Menachas. And if that's the case, the Kasha comes back that by Mincha in our Mishnah, there's nothing which is going to be continued, which is going to continue. So why are you going to the Kemas? That tzitz is mevatza, not just on the blood, but on everything. And anything which is tomei, the tzitz is mevatza. Okay, the Gemara, that's not true. If that's the case, why is it when something becomes tomei? Why did we say earlier about mincha that if the leftovers becomes tomei, it is possible? You just said the tzitz is mevatza. If the tzitz is mevatza, it's not possible. Answer well, Ovid was solved. When we say that tzitz is possible, is referring to where it gets burnt or gets lost, but not when it comes tomei. Says the Gemara, if that's the case, then Nitman Man Katani, why does the Beis even mention the concept of Tumah? Rabbi Lezer Pshita. According to Rabbi Lezer, it's obviously okay. Why? Even when the case we got burnt or lost, and they're not in existence, the Shivayim. Machshi Rabbi Lezer, nevertheless, Rabbi Lezer says that the Kemet is kosher, Nitma will become Tommy. The Isay, where it's actually in existence, it's just a problem that it's Tommy. Mi boya, do you need anybody to teach me it's okay? Obviously, when the Beis mentions the case of Tumah, it's referring to the shit of Rabbi Yeshua, that even though it's not lost, it's just Tomei, nevertheless it is possible. So you see that Rabbi Yeshua does not hold that the tzitz is mevatzah on Tomei. Whether the part which goes to the Mizbeach comes Tomei, or whether the bossa becomes Tomei, you can do Zrika, because you've got something which is continuing. If they both become Tomei, not. Rabbi Yeshua holds that if everything becomes Tomei, you don't continue with the Zrika. Why can't you continue with the Zrika? Let the tzitz be mevatza. Is the answer that Rabbi Yeshua holds that the tzitz is not mevatza la'achilas? If it's not mevatza la'achilas, we're back to square one. When you've got a mincha, why in the world should you put the kremas on the mizbeach if in the end of the day you're not going to do anything with the rest of it? You're not going to eat it. Answers more. Rabbi Yeshua, now Mishnah is like Rabbi Yeshua, when Rabbi Yeshua said you need to have both, and one without the other, you don't continue. It's only the chatchila. But b'diavad, it's okay. Here, Rabbi Yeshua lechatchila diavad goy. We're not tamer. Where do we see the shoni le Rabbi Yeshua being lechatchila le diavad? Rabbi Yeshua makes a difference between lechatchila and diavad. The Tanya, v'amafur Beis that makes a difference between lechatchila and diavad. Nitba bosish and nifsalo shos chutz the kloim. Rabbi Lezer me yizorik. Rabbi Lezer says you can do zvika. Why does Rabbi Lezer say you can do zvika? Does anybody know? Why does Rabbi Lezer say you do zvika? Oh, because he holds bosa afishin dam afishin bosa. Rabbi Yeshua me lo yizorik. Umoide Rabbi Yeshua shim zorak also works. So that's the Gemara's answer at this stage. It's a chiluk which lechatchila medavad. Then more two questions. Choda the psula. The Beis said earlier that's about mincha it's possible. Diavad mashvas possible with diavad. The Mishnah starts off by saying 5 things come on the Mizbeach. Lechatchila mashmas, mashma even lechatchila. Top of Ayin Ches Amud Aleph. Elo leikashe kan beyochid kan betzibur. The way Rashi explains is that our Mishnah holds tumah hutva betzibur. And we show in the previous cases to add tumah beyochid. By yochid, indeed, we say tumah tchuyah. So by yochid, you need the tzitz to meratza. And therefore, the tzitz is not meratza only on dam. Therefore, that's why he holds that if the minchas, the rest of it becomes tumah, it's possible because there's nothing else to continue. The rest of it is tumah. And without in bossa and dam in bossa. So therefore, you can't put the kmitza on the mizbeach. But Sheikh did our Mishnah, we'll talk about betzibur. Betzibur, we say tumah hutu betzibur. Since tumah is hutu betzibur, you don't need the tzitz to meratza. Since you don't need the tzitz to meratza, so therefore you can continue with that avodah. No, but yes. No, mincha is very yochid. Let's say a person donates a mincha. Now it's more very, very similar, but all according to Rabbi Yossi. It says more, name my sister the local Rabbi Yossi. The Tanya Blazer, he might just maratz al achilas. It's just maratz on achila. Rabbi Yossi, in that is maratz al achilas, not maratz al achilas. Here we have to be very clear about one thing. Everybody agrees that something which is even with the tzitz atoning, you can't do is we pretend that it is okay for the sake of continuing with our avodah. But to actually consider it Torah to be eaten, that nobody says. So therefore, Ablezer says it's considered as if it is Torah, and therefore you can continue with that. But Rabbi says no. Because he must hold of Rabbi Shua. Why? Meforshim explains. Because if you don't hold of Rabbi Shua, who cares if it's Tomei? If you hold that like Rabbi Lezer, that you can continue the avodah without any bossa, I don't care if it's meratz al achilus or not. It's only because I hold of Rabbi Yeshua that you need the bossa, do I make a difference to me whether the bossa is tummy or not? So the fact that he says that it is not meratz on the bossa is a raya that he holds like Rabbi Yeshua, that without bossa there's no dam, and that's why he says that you need the tzitz not meratz, you can't continue. Says the Gemara, Hashma says like Rabbi Yossi, it's not like Rabbi Yossi because according to Rabbi Yossi, the tzitz is not meratz al achilus, and therefore there's nothing to continue the avodah, it's his tummy. Look, Rabbi Yossi blesses really. He holds like a blessing. You can continue the avodah without the bossa. What do we care if it's not matzah achilas? If you hold dam after pishen bossa, even if it's not matzah on the achilas, just sprinkle the blood and who cares? And what difference does it make with matzah achilas? The Gemara l'tamech, which is obvious special. I thought maybe you would ask it. Rabbi Lezer dama tzitz matzah. Even though dam after pishen bossa, tzitz matzah achilas ma'elchasa. Rabbi Lezer himself says in that same brayse that tzitz is matzah achilas. Now, Rabbi himself holds that what? Which means that if there's no bossa, you can still continue the avodah. But if you only can continue the avodah, so who cares if it's matzah achilos? Elo lemai elo lemikbe very briefly. We talked about this once before. If a person does pigul, one of the conditions of pigul is what? The rest of the korban has to be done correctly. Let's say I shecht it with intention to do the wrong day, and then afterwards it becomes tomei, or afterwards I take it outside the Beis Hamikdash. I am not chav kos for eating it because now it's no longer pigul because it was no longer good. If you say that it's matzah achilos, then what happens is even if it becomes tomei, not if it goes out of Shlam, if it becomes tomei, we assume as if it is toy, and therefore it's as if the rest of the korbans were good, and therefore it will be pigul.
Animal becomes tummy. Doesn't it become possible as soon as the sheep?
Yes, it becomes also to be eaten because it's still toy. And then if a dead person touches it, so then it becomes tummy. And then it will no longer be pigul because it's no longer correct a good korban. It's only pigul if everything else was done correctly. If you were to eat it when it's tummy, if not for the tzitz meratza, it would be tummy. There'd be no cause. But the tzitz be meratza, no.
No, you do get it.
By the tzitz meratza, it's considered a kosher korban, so you do get koros. And another nafkamina, just finish with the other nafkamina, is the gabi me'ila. If you hold the tzitz meratza, so it's considered a kosher korban, so when you do the zvika, there's no me'ila. Once you've done zvika, there's no me'ila on any korban. But Hashem, if the tzitz not meratza, there's no zvika, and then you can't be chayv me'ila. What did you want to say, sorry?
Once it's pigul,
yeah.
Immediately.
Yes.
You're saying to me that once that is tagted pigul.
Yes.
And then somebody then comes and touches it, makes it tummy, and it becomes post pigul.
That's right.
And becomes.
And you will not be chav kos. Like we talked about, if a person does zvika with the intention to eat it on the wrong day, and then he goes and spills the blood. Then what happens? It's no longer pigul. Why? Because essentially what happens is when the pigul is only chal b'shas when it's at the end. So
someone ate it in between the pigul and the.
no, you still be because it's only if at the very end everything was done correctly. You will not be chayav kos. That's really as Raches. Now what says nafkamina legabe vitzei atzitz is not legabe achila, and it's not legabe damafishet boso. It's simply to do with the concept of whether there's pigul and whether there's meila. Says the Gemara. Elo lemikve bepigul afukim de meila. Kimiftige. Ableze sava meratze tzitzelabe. The tzitz is meratze umashvile ketoy. Says if it's time. Bekovale bepigul. So it does become pigul because it's as if it's time. Umapikle midei meila, but there's no meila. It's not like toy, there's no pigul, and there is meila because it's not gone away from meila. So at this stage of the Gemara say that our Mishnah is like Rabbi Yosi, because Rabbi Yosi holds like Rabbi Lezer. That Rabbi Lezer holds dam afrishein bosa, bosa afrishein dam, and that's why in our Mishnah you can continue with our avodah even though most of it is possible. You've got the blood, and therefore you can continue the avodah. You put the kibbutz in his back. You've got the spoons of the levona. The problem is the shtei alecha becomes tummy. You're not going to put any of it on his back because the shtei alecha gets eaten by the kohanim. So in what way is this a kosher korban? How can our Mishnah go like a piece? That means our Mishnah is referring to the shtei alechem on Shavuos. Now, sometimes the shtei alechem, most times the shtei alechem was always bought with 2 sheep, which is the Chasham Mitzvah. Every so often, Klal Yisrael did not have any sheep, so they would bring this lechem, the shtei alechem, without any sheep. So therefore, our Mishnah says 5 things, 2 of which are actually very connected: the shtei alechem and the Chasham Mitzvah, which is the Shlomim. Mishnah considered it 5 because they're not actually one, because sometimes you bring one without the other. But the Gemara now answers that maybe the Mishnah is referring to when you have them both together. And then therefore, even though the tzitz is not mevatza la'achilos, and you can't eat the shtei alechem, the tzitz is mevatza on the dam. And the Beis holds like Rabbi Lezer, that zivchisham etzibur, the dam is brought on the mizbeach, even though you're not going to be able to eat anything because the sheep is tummy. And therefore, our Mishnah is going like Rabbi Lezer. Says the Gemara, v'chitim l'kovi moen, hainu sham etzibur. So it's exactly, we're referring to the zivchisham etzibur, not referring to the bet. So in fact, our Mishnah is only referring to 4 different things. Our non-chamisha plan, our Mishnah says 5. Elo kasova b'yisi tu mohuto b'tzibur, it's muta b'tzibur, therefore you don't need the tzitz to be meratza. And therefore, without the tzitz being meratza, it's already told, it's okay. And therefore, we said before that Yossi said in that tzitz meratza lachilas, that's only by a private korban. But by a public korban, we say tumo hutva b'tzibur. And since tumo hutva b'tzibur, therefore, you do not need to be concerned about the tumah. It's as if it's all Torah and it's okay. Now, we have our halacha. Now, the Kohen Gadol, before he brings the Poah Adumah, the Kohen Gadol before Yom Kippur, what does he have to do? What's special about Kohen Gadol before Yom Kippur? No, that is 7 days before Yom Kippur, 7 days before the Poah Adumah, he separates from his wife and family and he goes to live by himself. Now, we want it to be as perfectly Torah as possible. There's a small chance that he's tummy from a Tmei Meis without knowing. He might be in the house of Tmei Meis. So we have a machlokas what to do. Well, Tanya, whether it's a Kohen Gadol who's bringing the Poah Adumah, whether it's a Kohen Gadol doing the Avodah Yom Kippur. Every single day, we sprinkle with him on the ashes of the Poah Adumah from every single Poah Adumah that ever existed. What they used to do is, every time they did the Poah Adumah, they would split it to 3 parts. One they kept to the side, as a mishmer, as guarding, as a storage. One part they used to use for everybody to make them Torah. And one part they set it aside that for every Kohen Gadol that would become Torah for Yom Kippur, and every Kohen Gadol for the Poah Adumah would get sprinkled from the 3rd part. So we actually kept all the Poah Adumahs from all the years. And why do we do it every single day? Because why do we do it every single day? Because we're not sure which day he became Tommy. When the person becomes Tommy from a Tmei Meis, he has to do which days does a person has to get sprinkled from a Tmei Meis? 3 and 7. So the day that he separates, we sprinkle him. Why? Because maybe it's the 3rd day from when he became Tommy. Maybe he became Tommy 2 days ago. And therefore this is the 3rd day. And then we sprinkle him again on the... So we sprinkle him on every day. Maybe it's 3 and 7. Rashi says the 4th day we don't sprinkle him, because then there's no chance of him becoming Tommy, because by then he's already separate from everybody else. Okay. We only do the third and the seventh. We're not so choshesh. Why do you need to do azor? If you're too much of it simple, we said two nafkaminas. One is whether you need that sits, and one how much effort we make to make sure of this toy. And our Mishnah does not hold of Rabbi, because our Mishnah can't go like Rabbi. Rabbi holds two more and he holds in that tzitz. So therefore, it comes out that our Mishnah cannot work with Rabbi, and therefore, indeed, our Mishnah is not like Rabbi. Now, we had before, Rabbi himself said that Rabbi Lezer and Rabbi Shiur argued, Dam aflish and bossa aflish and Dam, do you need both to continue the avodah? Came along Rabbi and he says, I agree with Rabbi Lezer, I agree with Rabbi Shiur, I agree with Rabbi Lezer by Zvach, I agree with Rabbi Shiur by Lezer by Mnochis, and that doesn't make any sense. Imagine two people come to Beis, and they have a shtar. One person says, no, I paid it, and therefore the shtar is no good. Another person says, no, you haven't, you owe me the shtar. And basically say you're both right. Would that make any sense? No, it doesn't make any sense. How can you give the shtar to two different people? The Tanya, and he explains himself. If and that doesn't make any sense. How can you say that a pastor like Rabbi Lezer, that one without the other does work, and then a pastor like Rabbi Shiur, that one without the other does not work? What he meant to say was something completely different. He wasn't passing not Rabbi Lezer, he wasn't passing not Rabbi Shiur. He was just saying that it makes sense to say that just like they argue in Hilchas Korbanos regarding whether there's bossa without dam or dam without bossa, they also argue by menachos regarding the krimis and the shivayim. That means the same logic that exists with the blood and the bossa exists that logic with the krimis and the shivayim. And when he came to menachos, he said, just like they argue by menachos, they also argue by zvachim. He wasn't saying I'm passing like Rabbi Lezer or I'm passing like Rabbi Shiur. He just said when they argued in zvachim, he said yes, it makes sense to argue in menachos. When he came to menachos, he said just like the argument in menachos makes sense to argue this. When he was doing zvachim, he said the way they argue in zvachim, they also argue in menachos. All he was saying is it makes sense to argue in both cases. So he said to him, Abai said to Papa said to Abai, when they were arguing the whole machlekes was based on the pasuk, and therefore he had to tell us that not only are they arguing in zvachim, it makes sense that they're arguing also menachos. What kind of statement would it be to say that just like the argument menachos, the argument zvachim? Where was the machlekes ever said in zvachim? So it doesn't make any sense that Beis should come along and say you should know. Just like the argument menachos, they also argue in zvachim. That doesn't make any sense. The whole machlekes was only based in zvachim. Why would you say such a thing? Elo the Gemara's got a new understanding of what Beis was trying to say. Lo kasha. There are two different ways, as we mentioned yesterday, that the shivayim of the mincha or the shivayim of the korban can get lost. One is they're burnt or lost. The other one is they come tom. Comes along Rabbi Yossi and he divides the case. Rabbi Lezer says we don't care, we continue with the blood even if the boss. Rabbi Shiur says one without it doesn't work. Comes along Rabbi Yossi says it depends. If it becomes tomei, which means that's an existence, so then I say okay, let's continue. If it's lost and destroyed, then I say like Rabbi Shiur, don't continue. Says the Gemara, nighttime. What would the logic be to continue if it comes tummy? Because the tzitz is meratza. That means it's still in existence. The whole problem is that it became tummy, and you have the tzitz, therefore we can continue. The Gemara, that's no good. Just now we proved by the Beis earlier. Rabbi says before, that the tzitz has no power to atone for achilas. And since it has no power to atone for achilas, it won't make any sense for Rabbi Yossi to say that when it comes to Tomei, it's not as bad as it getting lost, because it's only Tomei. Elele kasha, a new pshat. When is the Rabbi Lezer with Sibur, when is the Rabbi Shiur Yochid? That Rabbi Yossi was coming to differentiate between Sibur and Yochid. And he said, I agree with Rabbi Lezer with Sibur, and I agree with Rabbi Shiur Yochid. That means by Tzibur, if part of it gets lost, keep going. By Yochid, if a bit of it gets lost, stop. Says the Gemara, what's the logic? But Tzibur my time, the the reason would be that by tzibur, since Tumah Hutra b'tzibur, even if part of it becomes Tomei, keep going because Tumah Hutra b'tzibur. By Yochid not. Faith the Gemara, I've got two kashas. Chod, the Shabbos Rabbi Yisroel, Tumah T'chuya b'tzibur. Rabbi Yisroel holds Tumah T'chuya b'tzibur, not Hutra b'tzibur. Does anybody remember where did we see the Rabbi Yisroel holds Tumah T'chuya b'tzibur? We did have it. Today, where did we see that basically? Because he said the Kohen Gadol would have to do Zvika Hazor every day before Yom Kippur. If he held Tumah Hutra b'tzibur, we wouldn't be so concerned about being Tomei. Void I b'tzibur. Rabbi Lezer machshiv v'lo Rabbi Yeshua. Is only Rabbi Lezer machshiv, not Rabbi Yeshua. Top line Chesed with Beis. Almost b'tzibur for Rabbi Yeshua. We proved earlier that when it comes to a tzibur, even Rabbi Yeshua holds that Tumah Hutra b'tzibur. So why would Rabbi Beis say when it comes to the tzibur, I agree with Rabbi Lezer. When it comes to a yochid, I agree with Rabbi Yeshua. When it comes to a tzibur, Rabbi Yeshua never argued. Elo boy ani estiv Rabbi Lezer b'di'evet v'du Rabbi Yeshua lechatchila. Rabbi Yosef was coming to say, lechatchila, hold like Rabbi Yeshua, that you shouldn't continue the avodah unless you've got everything. But the Eved, hold like Rabbi Lezer, that you can do one without the other. But what the Eved? I feel Rabbi Yeshua nami moidu. If it's the Eved, he can't say I agree with Rabbi Lezer because the Eved Rabbi Yeshua never argued. Diktani moidu Rabbi Yeshua shim zorak hulza. And says the Gemara, ho betuma above the solve. Ki ketani moidu Rabbi Yeshua shim zorak hulza benitmo. Rabbi Yeshua says that b'di'eved, if it becomes tomei, keep going. Above the soul floy, but if it gets lost or burnt, Rabbi Yeshua would say to you, don't. He come Rabbi Yeshua needs to Rabbi Lezer b'di'eved above the soul. It comes out like this. According to Rabbi Lezer, we never care. You've got no boss, so who cares? You've got the blood. You keep going with the blood. I don't care that the boss has lost tomei or burnt. I care nothing. Why? He doesn't hold what he holds. Just pour out the blood, do the blood. It doesn't matter what happens to the rest of it. Rabbi Yeshua says, yes, I am deeply concerned about the boss. And without boss, you can't do the dam. But the Eved Beit Sibur, it's okay, because Tumah Hutra Beit Sibur, and therefore you've got the heter, even if it becomes Tomei. But when it gets lost, Rabbi Yeshua says, no. When it actually gets destroyed, Rabbi Yeshua says, there's no point in continuing. Why is there no point in continuing? Because you've got no boss, if you've got no boss, it's no good. Comes along Rabbi Yosef and says that b'di'eved, I hold like Rabbi Lezer that it's okay. It comes out that Rabbi Yosef in one level is being more machmir like Rabbi Yeshua. Because if you remember, Rabbi Yosef holds Tumah T'chuya b'tzibur, not Hutra b'tzibur. And therefore he holds that by tzibur, you can't rely on Tumah, it's no good. You can't rely on the Oichlin, it's T'chuya and Ein Atis Ma'atzah Oichlin. When it comes to Yochid, Rabbi Yosef is more maker than Rabbi Yeshua. And he holds that even if it's lost or burnt, you can still continue the avodah one without that. I want to summarize a little bit because it's continuing a little bit further. Whenever you bring a korban, there are always three main parts. One part is that which you sprinkle the blood on the Mizbeach. The second part is the parts of the sacrifices that get burnt on the Mizbeach. The third part is that which the owners eat. What happens is, everybody agrees that if the blood spilt before you manage to sprinkle it on the Mizbeach, then what happens? Everybody agrees if the blood spilt before you sprinkle it on the Mizbeach, everybody agrees that what? No good. Don't eat the meat, don't burn the fats on the Mizbeach, it's no good. Rather destroy the entire korban. The machlekes of Lezer and Rabbi Yeshua is what? Is in the case when the blood's okay, but the meat's no good. Shittas Rabbi Lezer, generally speaking, is we don't care. The blood's fine, keep going. Shittas Rabbi Yeshua is yes, we do care. In certain cases, Rabbi Yeshua has got colors, for example, that you can keep going. Fats that go on the mizbeach, but not the meat. That means. Again, we said there's three parts. Part which is sprinkled on Mizbeach, part which is burnt on Mizbeach, and part which the owners have to eat. Imagine if only the part the owners have to eat, that's the part that gets tummy gets destroyed. What would you say the halacha is? According to Rabbi Lezer. Of course it's okay. He holds that if everything becomes tummy, it's okay. According to Rabbi Yeshua. But the answer is it is okay. The reason why, because Rabbi Yeshua held as long as there is some basa, it's okay. And here, someone's going to be burnt on the Mizbeach. So therefore, the fact that the owners are not going to eat doesn't bother me. There's going to be basa is going on the Mizbeach. The fact that the owners can't eat, I don't care. But there's one exception to this rule, where Rabbi Shua, Pesach.
How do you know? That's a mitzvah to eat it.
Because there's a mitzvah to eat it. And here, even Rabbi Lezer agrees that if the Korban Pesach becomes Tomei, and therefore you can't eat it, and everything else is fine, the blood's fine, the fat's is fine, you can't. That's our Mishnah. Nitmo bosso, the meat becomes Tomei v'chilev kayim, but the fat's okay. And it's toy. Over here, kayim doesn't mean just that it's around, it's also it's toy. Einu zurek sadam. Nitmo achilev bosso kayim zurek sadam, you can sprinkle the blood, even according to Rabbi Shua, because at the end of the day, the Eker Korban Pesach is for what? Is for achil. Over mikdoshim ain't okay, but normal korbanos are not like that. And that normally everybody says the main thing is the fats that go on the mizbeach, and if that's okay, you can do zrika. And Rashi points out that according to Rabbi Lezer, by mukdashin, you don't need even to say that. Even if the bossa and the chilev is tummy, you can be zerkas adam. But this last part of the Mishnah is Rabbi Shua. Okay. If a person did zvika of the Korban Pesach's blood, and nobody can eat the Korban Pesach, why can nobody eat the Korban Pesach? Why can nobody eat the Korban Pesach? No, that's not the case. Again, if a person has Korban Pesach, they became Tommy. So nobody can eat the Korban Pesach, and the person, the Kohen, will told him, don't do zvika, there's no point doing zvika. Why is there no point doing zvika? Because nobody's going to eat the Korban Pesach. And the Kohen went and did zvika anyway, it's good enough. And you need something to eat, and nobody's going to eat it. Answers Gemara, achila with achila is not ma'akev. Is that true? A person has to be in the Korban Pesach according to the amount he can eat. The mitzvah. That means, let's say, for example, everybody in this room is ill, chas v'shalom, and nobody in this room can eat more than a kazayis, and nobody can eat a kazayis of Korban Pesach. We can only eat a tiny amount of Korban Pesach. When I was younger, I couldn't even imagine such a thing as not being able to eat. Get older, I remember my father used to say, I can't eat what's on my plate. He used to think to my father, like, what's wrong with him? Like, just sit and eat. It doesn't make a difference to eat half of this or more of this. You just sit and eat. As you get older, you will see there is such a thing as you just can't eat. Anyway, now if none of us could eat a kazais, and we bring a Korban Pesach for all of us in this room, what would the Korban Pesach status be? Possible. Why is it possible? Nobody can eat it. Says the more that's only like chatchila, but it's okay. Is it not ma'akev? What's a good word for la'akev? Is it not mandatory? That's a good word. Mandatory. Required is. What's word? It's not essential. Essential. Okay. Well, la'akev lo is not essential for Tanya, but michsas, according to the number, you have to shech the Korban Pesach for those designated. You might have thought we shechted for people not counted. It's as if you've done something wrong, but kosher, it's kosher. The pasuk says twice. Twice, michsas and techosu, 2 words counting. The pasuk repeats it to Ma'akev. This is a principle we had many times in Pesachim, and we had it already in Pesachim. Now what? Whenever the Torah says something twice, it's to teach you it's mandatory or it's essential. And therefore, since the Torah says it twice, it's mandatory. So you say, but that's talk about designated people. Nevertheless, so 2 things are essential. One is the Korban Pesach has to be shechted for the people designated. And if I shechted for group A and I shechted for group B, the Korban is possible. And B, if I shechted for people that can't eat, it's also possible. So how can Mav say that if I shech the Korban Pesach for people who are it's kosher? Answers the Gemara, Rav Domar Kav Nosan Domar Achilas Pesachim Ma'akva. It's Machlokas Tanoim. Rav Zein Kotishitas Sam Nosan that the Achilas Korban Pesach is not mandatory. It's not essential. I think mandatory is a better word, personally. That's right. He holds it's not mandatory. He holds it's not mandatory, meaning that it's a good thing, but it's not okay, essential if you prefer that word. Says well, Hayvam Nosan, which Nosan? I'm not sure if essential is the right word. Ma'akev means that it will not work without it.
Mandatory means chayim. Means compulsory.
It's more than compulsory. I think mandatory is better than essential. Okay, we know the meaning. That's right.
That's the translation. So it can't be
Mandatory is like this. If I say to you that it's mandatory to bring my child's learning to drive, so it's mandatory to bring your provisional license to your theory test. I'm saying to you that if you don't bring it, you won't be able to do your theory test. It's ma'akav. It's more than essential. I don't know if essential is good enough.
Essential for the situation. It's essential that you bring it.
Okay, I want to go back to how you know. Which of Nosson says that Kirachias Pesach no ma'akav? Ilim ho'am Nosson. The Tanya Nosson name. Minayin shekoli Yisrael yitzim Pesach echad. It's theoretically possible for the entire Klal Yisrael to bring one korban Pesach. We'll see later what practical applications this has. Tamudim avshachtu oisoi. Oisoi is plural or singular? Oisoi? Singular. The shachatu is plural, which is a contradiction. The shachtu is a contradiction. That's so that by the Klal Yisrael sheichtin. Sheichtin echad only one. And when Lamish Klal Yisrael yitzim Pesach echad, it is possible for everybody to do one korban Pesach. Now, what's the minimum number of people living in Klal Yisrael? What's the smallest amount of Yidden in Klal Yisrael? 22,000. There will never be less than 22,000 Yidden. Now, if there's 22,000 Yidden and there's only one korban Pesach, there's no way you're going to take a size for each one. So you see that according to Rav Nosson, you do not need achila. Says the Gemara, no proof. Meaning, every single one person is potentially possible to eat from the korban Pesach. So therefore, you shechted the korban Pesach for people that can eat. But when the korban Pesach is tamei, there isn't theoretically possible for anybody to eat it because the korban Pesach which is tamei, nobody eats it. And therefore, you can't compare the whole of Klal Yisrael being one korban Pesach where theoretically, potentially, there's possibility for somebody to eat to a case where nobody could potentially eat. What happens like this? All of us join together for one korban Pesach. We can all got healthy appetites. We can all eat a kazais. And this korban Pesach has, let's say, 10 kazaisim. So we all have, and we check the korban Pesach has got 10 kazaisim. After we all join together, another group join the bandwagon. The problem is, by the time we've eaten the kazais, there's nothing left for them. But they joined on. They decided to be part of the group. What's the halacha?
They don't have to do it before you eat.
Yeah, they did it before they eat, but they joined on after we already designated before the shechita. So the halacha is, we showed them sheish them kazayis. The first ones that there's enough to exercise for them, oichin to eat uptum lasas pesach sheni. Achroinim she'einem kazayis, there's no kazayis for them, ein oichin, there's nothing for them to eat. Bechavim lasas pesach sheni. If the blood was sprinkled with intention for the second group as well, even though the second group can't possibly eat because there's nothing left for them to eat, it's still kosher. But yet, so we see over here that the eating is not mandatory. So no, you can't compare it, even though it's better than the korban Pesach of the first one. Why? Tesa says, in the first proof report of the whole of Klal Yisrael, every single Yid can say, I am the one that's meant to be eating. So if every potential to eat exact. But here it's worse, because over here the second group can't say, I've got the right to eat, because the first group have first right, and therefore there's nothing left. But nevertheless, there's still theoretically a potential. Why? If the first group would drop out, the second group could have eaten. So therefore, there's still a possibility. Mashain came by Tomei, nobody has a possibility. Says one came, this the whole building of Shich. The Beis should have said, because they have the possibility of the first people moving out. Rav Nosson holds, as long as the blood was sprinkled for those who could eat the korban Pesach, it is good enough, even if nobody actually ate the korban Pesach. So let's work it out. According to Rav Nosson, you shech the korban Pesach and it's all toy. You sprinkle the blood, it's all toy. And then it became Tomei. What's Rav Nosson hold? You've done your mitzvah. Because the Zvika was okay. My dochkit, Rav the Mikkel Masisin Lechatchil Rav Nosson. Sorry, Rav Nosson was told even if it became Tomei before the Zvika, because the blood is still there. If it became Tomei before the okay, we'll talk about it later. My dochkit, Rav the Mikkel Masisin Lechatchil Rav Nosson. Why did Rav say our Mishnah saying Lechatchil like Rav Nosson? Let's say our Mishnah which says don't sprinkle the blood is Gem Shittas Chachamim. That they hold that if nobody can eat the korban Pesach, the whole thing is possible. And when the Mishnah says that it's no good, the Mishnah means even b'diavad. Says the Gemara, Masnisin Kashi say, the words of the Mishnah, if you look very carefully, it's actually blatantly obvious that our Mishnah only means the Chatchina. Why? And my ain zerkasatom. Why does the Mishnah say don't sprinkle the blood? Listen to possible. Normally, when we've got a korban which is possible, don't say don't sprinkle the blood. What do we say? The korban is possible. Here it doesn't say that. Here it just says don't sprinkle the blood. So according to the words of the Mishnah is, if the basar becomes tamei, don't sprinkle the blood. The Mishnah does not say once the carbon's basar. The Mishnah is going to come to Amnasim that lechatchila you should bring the carbon Pesach for Torah people, but for Diev it's okay. It says, well, Amnasim ishte fi achli lamni to bring on gava the chazila achila. Even if you can't eat the carbon Pesach, the carbon is kosher. But if the person can't eat the carbon Pesach, then the carbon's basar. That means like this. And let's say you've got a carbon Pesach which is tamei, according to Amnasim your Yotzi mitzvah. If the person himself is tamei and the carbon Pesach is Torah, according to Amnasim, what's the din? What's the din if the person himself tamei? You're not Yotzi mitzvah. Because he says, Ishna fi ochlo is referring to the person. The person has to be Torah. If the person himself is not Torah, it doesn't work. Says the Gemara, Man Tanal Hoda Tanal Bad. We're going to make a couple of brises. And we're going to try and verify who's the author of the brise. Shochtei la'oichla. Be shechted for those who eat it, but then you did zvika for no people can't eat it. Let's say example. Let's say I can't eat, but Boishi can eat. Right? Let's say you are capable of eating a carbon Pesach, I can't. Toli is the Kohen. He does shchita, intention that Yehuda Steinberg should eat. He does the zvika. Sorry, I forgot about the way around. He did the shchita that Moshe should be able to eat it. And then he did zvika that I should eat it. Works, it doesn't work. Says the Beis, a Pesach asve kosher v'odam yotze b'doicha v'asa. It works. Command. Who can this go like? According to the Chachamim, what did they hold? That you have to do shchita loichlov and zvika loichlov. Name I'm not saying that it doesn't matter if you can't eat it. The Torah says, "Ish lefi ochloi tochoisu alaseh." What does the word tochoisu mean? What's the word tochoisu mean? Shecht. Very good. Tochoisu means it means to count and also to shecht. What did you say? To count? No, it doesn't. It doesn't mean to cover. Tochoisu means to shecht. It also means to be counting. Nichsas. But it means to shecht. B'shas shchita has to be kavod for those who eat it. B'shas zvika we don't care. It says, let's say you shech the Korban Pesach for all of us, and we were all fine b'shas shchita. But by the time it came to shas zvika, time of shchita, we were all ill, and none of us were planning to eat even one drop. And we all got better b'shas zvika. Chol b'shas shchita, v'chol b'shas zvika. In shechtim v'zoykin no, that's chol b'shas shchita, b'shas zvika. You can't say sure if you ever shech the Korban Pesach, you have to make sure that the people you're shechting the Korban Pesach for, there's a lot of credit here. Yeah, Shaya, Shalom, we've got like half, and Levi's on actually as well today. So we've got about half credit today. No, almost half. So it comes out that when you shech your Korban Pesach credit, what are you going to do? Make sure that the people who are planning to eat the Korban Pesach still have the ability to eat it. They don't have corona. Says God, command, name according to Amnasim, we don't care. We said earlier that the person has to be able to eat. The Korban doesn't need to eat, and the person has to. Man can allow the third vice, a shochter b'tau v'kachtit v'abaylim. You shecht b'tau, and later become tummy. You saw katam b'tau v'alyucha b'as b'tumah. Carry on, keep doing the zvika, but don't eat it. Command. It must be Amnasim, because according to the Chachamim, what's the purpose of doing zvika? The Chachamim hold that what? What does the Chachamim hold? There's no point. Why? Because the Chachamim hold that you only continue the Korban Pesach if somebody's going to eat the Korban Pesach. Here the Korban Pesach became Tomei. If it became Tomei, nobody's going to eat it. If nobody's going to eat it, we said in our Mishnah, don't do Zvika. We're talking about when most of Kaisar became Tomei between the Shechita and the Zvika. Imagine, at 3 o'clock in the afternoon of Pesach, we checked the Korban Pesach and everybody's Tomei. At 3:30, most of Kaisar became Tomei. How can that be? The answer is the king died, and everybody dashed to the Levaya, all became Tomei, dashed back. So therefore, you're allowed to do this Zvika. Why are you allowed to do this Zvika? Because the Tumah huto b'tzibur. Hey, the Gemara, b'tzibur ma'in abos lecha b'tumah. Why can't you eat it? The halacha is Pesach haba b'tumah necha b'tumah. Let's write this down, not just on our fridge, on our wallpapers. Pesach haba b'tumah necha b'tumah. What does that mean? That if the Korban Pesach was bought b'tumah, you can eat b'tumah. Even though we said a million times, you can't Korban Pesach with your tummy. That's only if the Korban Pesach was bought b'tau. If the majority of Kaisar were tummy, and therefore we bought the Korban Pesach b'tumah, you can eat it b'tumah. So if the majority of Kaisar went to the Levaya of the king, let's eat it. Why is Beis not eat it? Answer is, so what? But this weekend was not b'tumah. The answer is, this is a very delicate point. I'm going to say outside and inside, as you pointed out correctly. The Gemara says that maybe the next year, the Zvika will be done b'tahara, and then the king will die, and then everyone will go to the Levaya, and then one to eat the Korban Pesach. And the halacha is that it's old Pesach haba b'tumah necha b'tumah is only if b'shas Zvika everybody was tummy. But if b'shas Zvika everybody was toy, and later they became tummy, so then nobody's allowed to eat the Korban Pesach. It's quite delicate. Sometimes it hairs a little bit. So therefore, like it's the shechita was b'tahara. Really over here, you're allowed to eat it. Why are you allowed to eat it? Because the ma'isa, what happened was the zvika was done b'tumah, and if the zvika is done b'tumah, the pesach's necha b'tumah. But the problem is that the difference between that being done b'tumah and then the tumah happening after the zvika is very delicate. And if people will say, last year we remember we started off b'tahara, we finished off b'tumah, and we ate it b'tumah, and we realized that last year was because they became tumah before zvika. But this year they became tumah after zvika, and therefore now you can't eat b'tumah. That's inside Gezel. Maybe the next year the owners will come tummy after Zika. But Yomi and they'll say Eshtakad last year Lenitmanu. Did we not become tummy Volchanu? Hashdav Nechol. But Yodi Eshtakad Kizik Balim Tmeim Hava. Hashda Balim Toim Hava. Let's see the last Rashi of the page. Yomi Eshtakad Bila Yodi Tmeim B'Shas Achila Volchanu Rafish Shechtos Betal. Hashdam Rafish Shechtos Rafish Gos Betal Nechol Betal. But Yodi they will realize. So if somebody says to Pesach Bo B'tumah Necha B'tumah, at which defining moment is this decided? B'shas Zvika. So if it was tummy before the shechita, even best. If it was tummy after the Zvika, no good, you can't eat it. If it's before the Zvika, is everybody here? There's no yet to bring up. Rambam Paskins all of this. The Mamish goes through every halach. It's amazing how the Rambam managed to summarize it and finish it off. You know what? We'll stop here because it's the end of a daf. Truth matter is the next is just one answer on this previous price, so it doesn't matter. We're caught up. That's the main thing. And again, tomorrow got a very long daf, so it's good that we're caught up. Shach cows will be fine.